They are no longer your people to save.
How's it going, everyone? Hope you're having a great day so far and are ready for this Doom Eternal video. This time around, we're going to dive into the lore of Doom and the Night Sentinels. Many things have been revealed from all the gameplays from the recent demo, and a few sources were able to show a good amount of detail in their gameplay about the Codex entries. Just as a reminder that there are minor spoilers here due to this video being about the lore and what we have seen so far. So if you want to keep the game as a surprise, go ahead and come back at a later time. But keep in mind, this video won't be covering everything about the Codex entries, as we only got to see a very small amount of information. Once Doom Eternal is released, you can expect me to cover all of the lore for the game, as I am a huge lore nerd. I'll most likely cover the lore in sections as a way to be more organized with it as well. Doom Eternal is just around the corner, and it's always great to see more people joining in on the fun in the community. It's also great to see more of you on the channel, so if you are new here or haven't yet, please consider subscribing and setting up notifications to stay up to date with the channel. Let's rip and tear together. Doom 2016 did a great job with the lore using Codex entries that you would find throughout each level. They were there if you wanted to know more, or if you didn't care, they weren't in your way. Doom Eternal is doing the same thing, and this time around id Software did an excellent job with organizing it and expanding more upon the lore for those who really want it. For the most part, we didn't know too much about the Night Sentinels in Doom 2016, except that they were warriors who fought with the Doomslayer and protected both the Wraiths and the people of Argent. There was also the Betrayer, who was a Night Sentinel who betrayed both his brethren and his people, all for the sake of having his fallen son be resurrected by Hell. The Sentinels were a big part of the civilization that existed in Argent due to the number of statues and artwork of them found throughout the campaign and some of the multiplayer levels. However, thanks to some of the new reveals, we were able to see some of the first Codex entries for the story of the Sentinels, which explains a lot of their origins. Of course, we didn't get to see all the Codex entries, so like I mentioned earlier, I will for sure be covering the topics of the Codex entries when the full game is released in March. Other than that, the first entry goes to the start of the civilization and how their world was created. It mentions that there was a cataclysm of some sort where a spear of metal and rock pierced their planet from pole to pole, from the cold wastes of the umbral plains to the fetid swamps of Ironfang. The spear was cast from heaven, and from within the planet, the elemental wraiths emerged. Two things I want to talk about real quick. Within this Codex entry, there is something about the umbral plains, which were also mentioned in the Slayer Testaments. In the first Slayer Testament, the Doomslayer scoured the umbral plains, seeking vengeance against the Dark Lords who had wronged him. We can now know that he wasn't in Hell looking for the Dark Lords, as this planet is the homeworld of the Sentinels. I always thought that the Umbral Plains were a place in Hell, so it's interesting to know why the Slayer was in these regions looking for those Dark Lords. Just something to think about. Another thing to mention is that the Wraiths seem to have been created by Heaven, as the Cataclysm could have been a way of the creation of the planet, and the Wraiths were the first creatures to inhabit the world. That would make sense as to why the people of this civilization would worship the Wraiths, as they were powerful beings and have existed on the planet since the beginning. Moving on, the first entry talks about how the Wraiths blessed the planet with health and energy. It made the planet fertile, but also created titans in the process. The Codex describes them as ancestrals, but since they were behemoths and towered above all other life, it makes it seem as if they were titans or just giants in nature. Around this time, the people of Argenta were created by the breath of the Wraiths. After they were created, they were close to extinction from fighting against the ancestrals until they realized their true strength and potential. The strongest of the people of Argenta grabbed the power by the root and put the ancestrals in their place. They ended the conflict between the two races and dominated the world they lived in. After reading all of that, it makes it seem that the Wraiths gave the Argenta a lot of power to use, and they realized how to use it. That would make sense as to why the Sentinels are ferocious warriors and the armies of Hell had a tough time fighting them. After they drove the ancestral beasts back to their bleak valleys, the people of Argenta prospered in their lands. They were built upon blood, iron, and magic. These were people who have known wars since the beginning of their creation, much like many other civilizations. Not far off, they crowned their first king, King Ormero the Father. Right here, I just want to say that this is definitely a huge Easter egg. If you rearrange the first two letters, then you have Romero, as in John Romero, one of the creators and fathers of the original Doom games. I highly doubt that this is a coincidence, so I wonder what other Easter eggs we'll be able to find. Within his rule, the people built the Cathedral of Reflection, where they would worship the first ones, and formed the Order of the Daig, whose priests paid tribute to the Wraiths. So one thing here to point out is that the Daig were originally Sentinel priests. That's why in the Exultia gameplay we hear King King Novik tell the Slayer that he cannot kill the priests as they are of Sentinel blood. As it seems, Daig Nylox, Daig Ranak, and Daig Gra decided to betray the Sentinels along with the Betrayer. So the Betrayer was not the only Sentinel to betray his people. There is another codex in a bit that I will talk about concerning the betrayal. The last section of part 1 says something of importance. It mentions that the Wraith Call, or rather the power from the Wraiths, had an effect on lesser-minded people. It would distort their form and drive them mad. It also mentions that the Sentinels were not of lesser men and fought these wicked creatures and rose above the fire, their bodies and souls tempered, and an unbreakable will was shaped in the forge of battle. Afterwards, the Legion of the Night Sentinels was born. In my opinion, this could potentially be how this version of Hell was created. The lesser-minded people became demons, and over time they found their own dimension as they were driven away from the Sentinel world. The Wraith Call not only affected lesser-minded people, but also animals and other creatures. Those other creatures could have become demons, like the gargoyles could have been more like a bird-like animal, and so on. Take what I say with a grain of salt, as I could be completely wrong with this, but if this is true, then there could be somewhat of an origin for the Dark Realm. By the time this even happens is many years before the events of Hell invading Argent-Dunur. Let me know what you guys think about that one. Part 2 of the history of the Sentinels is not complete as we were unable to see more of it. However, it does explain a good amount for the history. In this part, you can see a picture of the Conmaker and the Seraphim revealing themselves to the people of Argenta. Previous to this, the people were living in a time of grief, but once their new ruler, King Etrix, took the throne, Heaven wanted to involve themselves more directly with the civilization. They took notice of their great deeds, convictions, and sought to make a bond with their swords and bring everlasting order to their world. At this point of time, things may have taken a different turn for the people of Argenta. They may have been so used to worshipping the Wraiths, and now they were granted the blessings from heaven. If the Doomslayer was around at this time, that could be when he was blessed by the Seraphim. Another thing that is evident is that the architecture within the places of Sentinel Prime, for instance, have many statues showing the Seraphim and Makers. I wonder if the people of Argenta still worship the Wraiths or moved on to worship the Conmaker, as she is a higher being than the Wraiths. I'm sure we'll figure that one out in another Codex entry. Moving on to part 3 of the history of the Sentinels, it is also unfinished as we couldn't see the whole part. This section talks about how the people of Argenta discovered other worlds with the help of the Conmaker. At least as far as I can tell from the wording in the picture, it seems as if they're a spacecraft and a fortress of doom-looking structure leaving the atmosphere of a planet. If this is true about the Sentinels migrating to other planets, then that would explain why there was a city inside of Mars. I talked about that in an earlier video of mine and mentioned that the city could have been created by Sentinels, unless of course it was a different civilization that the Sentinels discovered. So I guess I may be right about that after all. The city did have a slipgate to Sentinel Prime, so that's another thing to consider. One big reveal that I found outside of the Codex entry was from an article by Sci-Fi Wire where they talked with Dark Horse Books, who are the ones creating the art book called The Art of Doom Eternal. For those who wanted to check out the article, I'll leave a link in the description below. The article showed off a few good things, such as a description of the Doom Hunter, the Sentinels, and other things. We know that the Doom Hunter was part of an ancient race of beast-like hunters that were created to hunt down the Night Sentinels and the Doomslayer during the Unholy Crusade. The one major thing that caught my eye was the fact that the particular Doom Hunter in the game was uncovered from an excavation near the cultist base in the Arctic region of Earth. The creature was preserved in the ice for millions of years, and this could mean something huge. Because it was found on Earth, would that mean the human race have Sentinel blood? Think about it, if the Sentinels migrated to other planets such as Mars, they could have easily gone to Earth as well. They might have fought the Doom Hunters millions of years ago, and after making the creatures near extinct, the remaining Sentinels on Earth were among the first inhabitants. Obviously, this dimension of Earth can be completely different in its history and origins, so it can be possible. Other games like Halo have done alternate versions of Earth and its history, so it's not something new. Going back to the Codex, under the entry for the second level named Exultia, seems to be a journal entry from possibly King Novik. Throughout the entry, it talks about how the Daig betrayed their people and what was the outcome. At this time, the people of Argenta were fed up with the unfair methods that the Conmaker had laid before them. The Daig made it seem that it was possible to cripple the Conmaker's source of power in Hell by destroying a foundry of souls where the innocent are put to the fire for the essence. If the Sentinels could destroy the foundry in Hell, they could have a quick victory against both Hell and the Conmaker. As the king and the Daig commanded the Doomslayer and the Night Sentinels to infiltrate the heart of Hell, the Daig closed the path behind them, trapping them forever in the Dark Realm. It seems as if King Novik was a good king, as he was respected by the Doomslayer, as we see the Slayer interact with him in the Exultia level. However, the king felt that he was blinded by the betrayal and didn't even see it coming. He was already in grief for the loss of Taras Navad and his people. By the way, Taras Navad is another level in the campaign and possibly either a city or world that was lost to the forces of hell. I feel bad for King Novik. He may have been the last king and was part of the downfall of his people. All in all, this entry lets us know that the betrayal was not the betrayer alone, and let us know how the Slayer was trapped in hell, starting his never-ending crusade. The last thing I wanted to talk about was another reveal from the same article. They showed off some awesome looking concept art for the Night Sentinels. There are different versions that look similar to what the armor looks like for the Doomslayer and what we've seen on the Betrayer so far. Here you can see that this particular Sentinel armor is an exact match, excluding the helmet, to what the Marauder wears. Considering the artwork is something from id Software, we can know that the concept art is accurate and legit. With that being said, this may be all the necessary confirmation we needed to know without a doubt that the Marauder is a fallen Night Sentinel. This is clearly enough evidence, and on top of that, in the campaign we'll be able to encounter him a couple of times according to what Hugo Martin said in a recent no-clip interview. However, we still don't know who exactly the Marauder is. Is he just a random fallen Night Sentinel, or is he the son of the Betrayer? In Doom 2016, it says that the son of the Betrayer was resurrected but in the form of a demon. Specifically, it says, and I quote, "For his payment, the Betrayer's son was returned to him in our form, and the icon of sin was brought upon the heathens. His vengeance was swift and merciless, for the wages of treachery are suffering." This is from the last entry for the Wraith Codex. So from the wording, it can be interpreted two different ways. Either the son became the icon of sin, or the son became a demon and the icon of sin, someone different, was brought upon the heathens. All in all, something to consider for the Marauder, as he may or may not be the Betrayer's son. I'm more leaning on the notion that the Marauder is someone else, but let me know what you all think about that. The lore for Doom Eternal is really shaping up into something I have always wanted in a game like this. For someone being a lore nerd, this is the right amount of info to not have everything explained to you in detail, but rather to have you try to figure it out. I'm really glad that we will be able to dive more into the lore of the Sentinels and the Doomslayer himself. What do you all think about the lore of Doom Eternal? Let me know down in the comment section. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if so, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Doing that will help out the channel a ton and help me reach my goal of 20,000 subscribers by the time Doom Eternal is released. Also, be sure to check out my social media accounts at RipNtear Gaming to see other things over there as well. You guys are all awesome, and until next time, don't forget to rip and tear. Peace.